He could make crowds believe nothing was impossible. But what few knew is that Muhammad Ali also made coins disappear. Between punches, fights, and glory, the greatest boxer of all time had a curious secret, a quiet love of magic and tricks that left even his rivals speechless. He could make crowds believe nothing was impossible. But what few knew is that Muhammad Ali also made coins disappear. Between punches, fights, and glory, the greatest boxer of all time had a curious secret, a quiet love of magic and tricks that left even his rivals speechless. Muhammad Ali didn't just dazzle with his punches, he fascinated with the unexpected. Outside the ring, away from the cameras and the spotlight, the man who defied kings and dictators enjoyed something few could imagine. Magic. Yes, the same Ali who made the world stop to watch his fights also made friends and children laugh with simple tricks, but performed with a dexterity that seemed supernatural. He shuffled cards with the same precision with which he dodged punches. He turned coins into nothingness with the same speed with which he made the impossible happen in the ring. This passion began long before fame. When he was still Cassius Clay, a curious boy from Louisville, he was captivated by street magicians. He observed every movement, every detail, trying to understand how something impossible could seem so real. Years later, with millions of eyes on him, he discovered that illusion and boxing had something in common. Both required control, rhythm, and mystery. In the ring, he would fool his opponent with a shoulder movement. In life, he enchanted audiences with his gift for transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary. But there was more than just fun in these tricks. For Ali, magic was a form of balance. Between the weight of fame and the burden of the civil rights struggle, he found in small acts of illusion a way to breathe a space where the impossible was permitted, and control was entirely in his hands. While the world saw him as a symbol of strength, Ali used magic to remind himself that he was still human, still capable of smiling, still capable of surprising, and perhaps, of hiding a little from his own pain. Louisville, Kentucky, early 1940s. A skinny boy with wide, curious eyes was cruising the dusty city streets on a borrowed bicycle. His name was Cassius Marcellus Clay. At the time, no one could have imagined that this shy boy who enjoyed people watching in the main square would become the most famous man on the planet. Cassius didn't yet have boxing gloves, fame, or the spotlight. He had only an insatiable curiosity. Everything involving mystery fascinated him, and magic was his first secret passion. One day, on his way home from school, he approached a group gathered around an elderly street magician. The man, in a worn suit and worn hat, was performing a simple disappearing act with coins. Cassius stood still, mesmerized. The coin vanished, reappeared behind a child's ear, then vanished again. The audience applauded, but Cassius didn't blink. He wanted to understand how it was as if the magician had power over reality, absolute mastery over the impossible. And within that boy, something was born that would later define his entire life, the desire to control the seemingly uncontrollable. At home, Cassius picked up a coin and tried to repeat the trick. He failed dozens of times. The object fell, slipped from his fingers, rolled across the floor, but with each mistake, he smiled. He didn't give up. There was a silent connection between those failures and the struggle he waged at school, on the street, and even within himself. Life as a black boy in segregated America wasn't about applause, it was about humiliation and harsh stares. Magic, for him, became a refuge, a small space of power where, for a few seconds, he could decide what disappeared and what remained. When he discovered boxing, the transition was almost natural. The ring became his new stage for illusion. Cassius realized that deceiving an opponent was like deceiving the audience. It was all about timing, distraction, and rhythm. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, he would say. This phrase, which would become legendary, was more than poetry, it was pure magic. He made his opponent look one way while the blow came the other. He was an illusionist wearing gloves. But what few people knew is that, even after his fame, Ali never abandoned this fascination. Behind the scenes, between interviews, he performed card tricks for journalists and children. He said the magic made him feel at peace, as if he were in control of something no one could take away from him. When I make a coin disappear, the whole world goes quiet for a second, he once confided to a friend. And in that second, I'm not a boxer, I'm just me. The boy who transformed fear into illusion never ceased to exist. He simply traded his top hat for gloves. Because, deep down, Muhammad Ali didn't fight just to win, he fought to prove that, with courage and imagination, even the impossible can be outwitted. And that's how the legend began, not with a coup, but with a trick. Muhammad Ali didn't need cards or coins to perform magic. He simply stepped into the ring. His steps were rehearsed like a magician's act on stage. Every movement was calculated, every glance part of an invisible spectacle that only he seemed to understand. While other fighters practiced punches, Ali practiced rhythm. The ring was his platform, the audience his spectators, and his opponent his most skeptical spectator. He made it look effortless, he floated, he smiled, he provoked, and when least expected, the punch came as a final trick. But this theatricality wasn't just vanity, it was an extension of the curious boy who saw illusion as a form of control. During fights, Ali used his mind as a weapon. "People believe what they see, until I show them otherwise," he would say, laughing. He studied his opponent's bodies like a magician studies the audience's gaze. He knew where to draw attention, knew when to distract. Magic became a tactic. While everyone watched his feet dance, few noticed he was conducting an invisible symphony, the rhythm of doubt. And doubt, in boxing, is the most devastating blow. Behind the scenes, away from the sweat and flashes, the playful Ali reappeared. Close friends said he carried decks of cards to training, and between sessions, he enchanted coaches and journalists with simple tricks. He would make a card disappear, guess a number, pretend to pass a coin through his skin. When people laughed, he laughed too, a loose, light, almost childlike laugh. It was as if, for a few moments, the man who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders was once again the boy from Louisville playing on the sidewalk. Curious thing is that he saw a parallel between illusionism and his own social struggle. "When I do magic," he said, "people forget the color of my skin. They only see what I create." This phrase said much more than it seemed. For Ali, magic was a symbolic way of overcoming prejudice, of showing that the impossible could be real, that the mind could defy logic and even injustice. Just as he did in the ring, he transformed pain into spectacle, and anger into art on interviews. He said he learned to dominate the audience the way a magician dominates their attention. He looked them in the eye, spoke slowly, and used theatrical pauses. Even his provocations were choreographed. "I'm the greatest," he shouted, and everyone believed him, not because he said it, but because he made it seem true. It was the most brilliant trick of all, making the impossible seem inevitable. Ali was more than a boxer. He was a master of emotional illusion. While everyone expected a punch, he delivered a performance. While the world saw him as a fighter, he was, in fact, an artist, someone who understood the power of belief, deception, and faith in the improbable. And at the height of his fame, when he seemed to have the whole world at his feet, Muhammad Ali discovered that the magic he most needed to perform was to disappear inside. Because sometimes the real trick isn't making something go away, it's hiding what's hurting. If you've ever used a smile to hide your pain, leave a like now. It shows you understand what Ali was feeling. And if this story surprised you, subscribe, because what comes next will take your breath away. And to help us continue uncovering these real stories and improving the quality of our content, consider purchasing our ebook. You'll find the direct link in the first link in the description. Your support makes all the difference. There was a moment when magic stopped being just play and became a refuge. At the height of his career, Muhammad Ali was the most recognized man on earth. No stage was too small for his charisma, no crowd too big for his voice. But behind the scenes there was something few realized. The burden of being a symbol, being the greatest, required more than strength. It required constant pretending. Pretending nothing shook him. Pretending his body didn't hurt. Pretending his soul didn't bleed from the political, racial, and personal pressures surrounding him. It was at this point that illusionism took on a new meaning, not as a distraction, but as a means of survival. There he lived amidst storms. The headlines called him a hero and a traitor, a genius and a madman. After refusing to fight in the Vietnam War, he lost his title, his prestige, and most of his influential friends. From one day to the next, he went from idol to enemy. And while the world judged him, he continued doing what he knew best, turning chaos into a spectacle. As reporters surrounded him, he would take a coin from his pocket, pretend it disappeared, and say with a smile, "See, so the respect of the powerful for me has disappeared." Everyone laughed, but inside, he screamed. The tricks became a form of quiet rebellion. When he felt the weight of hatred and prejudice, Ali used magic to remind himself that he could still control something. He might not control the government's decisions or the judgment of the masses, but he could still decide what his eyes and the eyes of others saw. It was a form of emotional resistance. Magic, like boxing, was an act of faith, a reminder that even the impossible could be manipulated if you believed enough. It is said that on lonely nights, he would practice alone in front of the mirror. He would make a handkerchief disappear with a quick flick of his hand, then laugh, as if testing his own ability to deceive himself. This wasn't vanity, it was self-defense. It was the boy Cassius, the magician from Louisville, trying to remind the man Muhammad that there was still beauty in small illusions, and that, no matter how much the world tried to crush him, he could still make something come from nothing. During interviews, some journalists noted that he rarely contradicted himself, but always reinvented himself. He was a master of perception. He changed the tone, the pace, the focus of the conversation. He asked questions when he should have answered, laughed when he should have remained silent. He understood that the public didn't just want the truth, they wanted the prettiest version of it. It was the same principle as magic. The truth is simple, but the illusion is irresistible. Once, while visiting a children's hospital, Ali performed a coin disappearing trick. A girl with cancer looked him in the eye and asked, "Can you make my pain disappear too?" He remained silent. There was no trick that could solve that, so he bent down, took the girl's hand, and replied, "I can't make the pain disappear, but I can make you believe it's less than it seems." And in that instant, the magic returned to what it always was. Hope. Muhammad Ali didn't use tricks to deceive, he used them to heal. It was as if, with each disappearance, he erased a piece of the pain the world caused him. He understood that true magic isn't in your hands, it's in how you make people feel. But time, indeed, is the greatest magician of all, and it was about to do something that not even Ali could have foreseen. The body that once floated like a butterfly slowly began to feel heavy. The quick reflexes, the perfect dodges, the provocative smile, everything seemed to recede from the mirror, like a memory slowly fading. When his Parkinson's diagnosis arrived, Muhammad Ali realized that his greatest enemy was no longer a man in the ring, it was time. A silent, relentless enemy that could not be knocked out. But Ali, with the magician's soul he always possessed, decided to turn even this into a spectacle. The tremors began discreetly, like a trick gone wrong. His once steady hands, which had once enchanted the world with tricks and illusions, now trembled before a deck of cards. But even so, he wouldn't stop. "If the hand shakes," he would say with a smile, "it's just the trick getting more difficult." Backstage at events and interviews, he continued to perform small magic tricks for friends, fans, and children. He knew his body was losing control, but his mind, his spirit still knew how to enchant. It was as if to say, "Maybe I can't stop time, but I can still outwit pain." That are records of encounters where he, already with a weak voice and a stiff body, insisted on showing off a new trick. He would take a red handkerchief, hide it between his fingers, and make it disappear. People were moved not by the trick, but by the gesture, by his stubbornness in remaining the man who enchanted. Every time he smiled after a trick, the audience saw, behind that tired look, the same boy from Louisville, curious, playful, indomitable. But Ali also knew that his most powerful magic was never in his hands, but in people's minds. He transformed suffering into symbol, weakness into strength, illness into message. "It's not the body that defines a man, it's the spirit that keeps him going," he would say in lectures and meetings. The audience wept, because they understood that the man before them was no longer just the world boxing champion. He was the champion of human resilience. The ring magician now struggled against his own disappearance. And, ironically, the man who made objects disappear began to be swallowed by his own shadow, by the slowness of his body and the silence of his mind. But still, he persisted. He practiced simple tricks every day, as if challenging the universe to recognize that there was still magic within him. It was a duel between faith and fragility. As in all the duels of his life, Ali refused to give up. In a documentary, a close friend recounted a scene no one has forgotten. Ali sat in his home, trembling slightly, with a coin between his fingers. He tried to make it disappear, but it fell to the floor. Instead of becoming frustrated, he looked at it, laughed, and said, "Even when magic fails, the audience still believes." And in that moment, he was no longer a sick man. He was once again the magician, the fighter, the man who always turned defeat into a spectacle. That was his greatest illusion, making the world believe that time couldn't defeat him. And in a way, he succeeded, because to this day, when the name Muhammad Ali is uttered, the whole world stops for a second, as if waiting for the next trick. But every magician's last act is disappearance, and Ali's was the most beautiful of all. Muhammad Ali's final act didn't happen in a ring, nor under the spotlights of an arena. It happened in silence, when his voice no longer came out clearly and his body barely responded. The man who once made the world believe in the impossible began preparing his final trick, disappearing, but in a way the world would never forget. Every gesture, every public appearance in the final years of his life was like a carefully staged farewell. He didn't want pity, he wanted to leave a living memory, something greater than his body. And he succeeded. Over the past few decades, Ali began to use the same talent that made him famous in the ring and in magic to inspire. In meetings with young people, he spoke not of victories, but of faith and purpose. "You can lose everything except your belief in yourself," he would say, his voice trembling but firm. It was as if the disease had taken away his physical strength only to amplify his spiritual strength. He no longer needed tricks or tricks. The miracle now was to be present, to smile, and to continue to enchant hearts. Those who accompanied him said Ali had an almost poetic relationship with death. He spoke of it as if it were a long-awaited show, a final audience. "One day, I will truly disappear, and when that happens, I want the world to look up to the sky and say, 'He's still fighting up there.'" This line, delivered with laughter, showed how deeply he understood the power of permanence. For him, death wasn't an end. It was the final trick, the transition from man to legend. On the day of his funeral, the entire world stopped. Thousands lined the streets, and millions watched from afar. There was silence, tears, and a kind of reverence few men have ever received. It was as if the planet, for a moment, breathed along, trying to understand how someone so human could become so eternal. But those who looked closely could see the magic there. There were no tricks, only legacy. The boy who once enchanted friends with disappearing coins now vanished before the world, leaving something much greater in his place. Inspiration. Close friends say that, until his final days, he still asked to see cards and coins. Sometimes, trembling, he tried to repeat an old trick. Other times he asked someone to do it for him, just so he could smile. It was as if, deep down, he knew that magic was never about the trick, but about faith in something impossible. The same faith that made him conquer giants, defy governments, and endure an illness that would have broken any other man. Muhammad Ali wasn't just the greatest boxer in history. He was the man who transformed life into spectacle, pain into art, and time into an ally. The magician who taught us that true strength lies not in fists, but in the soul that never gives up. And when the world said goodbye to him, the feeling wasn't of loss, but of enchantment, as if for a moment everyone believed he had simply disappeared, only to reappear where memory never fades. Muhammad Ali's magic wasn't in making objects disappear. It was in making people believe, for a brief moment, that nothing is impossible, not even transforming one's own life into an eternal illusion of light, courage, and hope. Because as long as there's anyone who speaks his name with admiration, Ali will never truly have disappeared.